Good evening. It's good to see everybody tonight. I'm so thankful to have this opportunity to be with you and be a part of this vacation Bible school on such an important and relevant theme. And tonight we'll be talking about, as assigned for this session, the age of the earth, or as we might say, should we believe in Exodus 20 and verse 11, which says, "For in 6 days God created the heavens, the earth, the sea, and all that in them is." Should we believe that? If we believe that, we believe that the earth is only 5 days older than mankind. But that is, of course, not what we would be told in many places today. Now, if there's someone up in the booth that could turn this monitor on, I would buy you a brownie after class. This monitor is not on right here. I'll turn around and look if I have to, but maybe we can get that going. I appreciate what Brother Jeff had to say. I will encourage you to pick up a copy of the Christian Courier, and they are available in the table in the back, as well as some other resources. But this would be free for life, and you could even, pass this on after you're gone if you want to. But we would love to have you receiving this and have a personal Bible study at home. There are typically 4 articles in the Christian Courier, one main feature article, a shorter one, then a column called Notes from the Margin of My Bible, and then a Q&A. So that is something that I hope you'll at least take a look at. I'll also mention that if you pick a copy of this up, you will also have then the name of our website, which is simply christiancourier.com. And you'll find all kinds of articles, including a number of articles relating to our studies this week. And the reason I point this out is you may be having a conversation with a friend or a coworker or family member, and some topic may come up, and it might not even be on these kinds of issues we're talking about this week. But this is an excellent way to share with someone very easily more information about the Bible. You can just go, you can find an article on all kinds of Bible verses or topics and send someone a link, said, I think this is interesting, and you just send it to them. You never know where that kind of spark of interest may lead to. So it is a very helpful tool, not only for your own study, but also for evangelistic purposes. So, should we believe in Exodus 20 and 11? That God created everything in 6 days. Meaning, as I said a minute ago, the earth is only 5 days older than mankind. We talked a little bit last night about really the only 2 options concerning where all this came from. The origin of the universe. There's either a natural or a supernatural beginning. This, you see, represented on this chart, is the natural origin, or the Big Bang Theory, that has become so popular and just accepted hands down by so many people. But what I'll point out to you is, in relation to our study tonight, that it is estimated that the universe is somewhere around 14 billion years old, according to evolutionary chronology. 14 billion years old. And then the earth has come along sometime later in the cosmic evolution of the universe. Now, I just decided this morning, just for fun, as I was having a cup of coffee, that I would just Google the age of the universe and see what comes up. And you won't be surprised to find that in that search, ranking high was a link to Wikipedia. So I clicked on the link to Wikipedia, and there is the article talking about how old the earth is, or how old the universe is. And I scanned down and found this tucked in at the very end of the article. And it says, calculating the age of the universe is accurate only if the assumptions built into the models being used to estimate it are also accurate. Now, reading down through the article, which is, of course, produced for popular consumption, so many people are going to find this type of material online that supports the narrative that's found in the world at large. Here we have a concession. It's only accurate, these models, if what? The assumptions that are built into the calculations are accurate. This is something we're going to talk tonight about. What kind of assumptions are built into this matter that the universe is 14 billion years old? It's stated just like it's fact. The earth is 4.5 billion years old. Man came along maybe somewhere around 2 million or maybe 500,000 or 200,000 years ago, but stated like a matter of fact. What kind of assumptions are a part of these calculations? Think about this evolutionary timeline. We're told that the universe came into existence, again, how? Out of nothing, an effect without a cause, a design without a designer. Set aside common sense, we're told, and understand that out of nothing came something around 13.8 billion years ago. And then on down the line, as things began to develop and evolve in the universe, the earth was formed somewhere around 4.5 billion years ago. And then supposedly in the earth, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow night, we see this explosion of life and this evolution of life. And so just taking as a sample the last 300 million years, we saw the arrival of the dinosaurs and then the extinction of the dinosaurs. And then maybe around 66 million years ago, eventually mammals evolved. And then from mammals in general, we find primates evolved. And then somewhere later in time, those primates began to walk a little bit more erect. Everybody's seen the picture, right, of the chimp to man, and he's finally standing up straight. And maybe somewhere around 2 million years ago, or maybe not quite that long ago, maybe 200,000 years ago, you evolved. So where does man fit in relation to, let's just say, the earth? He is way down here after all of this development, finally the evolution in the last 300 million years of reptiles and birds and mammals and primates, and finally, recently, humankind. So we keep this in mind as we study tonight. These relationships of time, the universe, the earth, and finally, way down here, man evolves. This is the evolutionary chronology. Think about how important this time is to the theory. The agnostic Robert Jastrow, one of the premier astronomers of the 20th century, said, the key to Darwin's explanation is time. Now, evolutionists agree, not on everything, not about how, that is, what is the mechanism for example, the origin of the species. How did that happen? And where did life begin? Evolutionists themselves disagree. There's debates going on within the evolutionary community about these matters. But they all agree on this. What? There had to be a vast amount of time for all of these accidents to line up and lead to the evolution of humankind. According to one scientist, the hero in all of this is time. I have with me a book. This is my original copy written by Brother Wayne Jackson. I think I received this in 1989, and this is an updated version of it that you'll see on the table in the back. I'm going to read to you from several scientists, and the reason I'm pointing this out is because these sources are documented in this book, the original sources where you can go and see these scientists writing. It's all documented. And so what I'm reading to you is a representation of what a lot of people have said about this matter of time and the methods by which this vast amount of time is supposedly understood. So let me read to you from this individual writing in Scientific America. Dr. George Wald, who was associated many years with Harvard University, wrote the following. The important point is that since the origin of life belongs in the category of, at least once, phenomena, time is on its side. However improbable we regard this event or any of the steps it involves, given enough time, it will almost certainly happen at least once. And for life as we know it, with its capability for growth and reproduction, once may be enough. Time is the hero of the plot. The time with which we have to deal with here is on the order of 2 billion years. That is, from that first spark of life, allegedly, from amoeba to man, from molecules to man. 2 billion years. What we regard as impossible, listen to this, what we regard as impossible on the basis of human experience is meaningless here. Given so much time, the impossible becomes possible. The possible becomes probable, and the probable becomes virtually certain. One only has to wait. Time itself performs the miracle. How important is time to the evolutionist? They say two things. One, we've got to have it. And then they try to convince us that as long as you have enough of it, anything can happen at least once. In fact, given enough time, it's almost certain that it's going to happen. Well, we'll think about that this evening. Here's what we might call our basic argument. Very simple statement of these ideas that we'll be talking about concerning time. We can state it like this. Unless the earth is billions of years old, there's not enough time for evolution. That's the admission of the evolutionists. We got to have time. Time's the hero of the plot. We're talking about 2 billion years. Certainly could happen at least once. Well, what if the earth is not billions of years old? Then there's not enough time for evolution. That's what we're going to contend tonight. The earth is not billions of years old. And if we can substantiate that, evolution has no leg to stand on. And it won't evolve any either. There's different ways to cut down a tree, right? If you choose to, you might climb up the tree and begin to lop off one limb at a time. You could climb up a tree with a handsaw and I guess eventually cut it all down. Or watching the proper safety videos on YouTube, you could take a chainsaw and with a very fast and swift process cut that tree down. Once you eliminate vast amounts of time, you just cut evolution down right at the base. And that's what we're going to think about. The earth is not billions of years old. Therefore, there's not enough time for evolution as admitted by the evolutionists themselves. So our plan tonight to work through this will involve these phases of study. First, we'll ask the question, well, where is the evidence for an ancient earth? Now, we won't be able to cover this exhaustively by any means, but it's a fair question to ask. We'll have some representative samples from scientists about this matter of evidence. You turn on the Discovery Channel or National Geographic, or you go to the museum, and you see all kinds of dates on all kinds of things. Millions of years old, billions of years old. Well, what is the evidence for the ancient earth? Then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about problems of these evolutionary dating methods. This rock is 50 million years old. Dinosaurs lived 200 million years ago. Well, how do we know that? Well, the rock dates to this and that. We'll talk about the dating methods, and then we'll reflect upon the Bible and the age of the earth, and talk about why that's important. Dr. Stephen Morbeth was a British geochronologist. That is, he was a geologist who specialized and, in fact, developed dating techniques. He was an award-winning scientist. So if you were to, in fact, search for Stephen Morbeth and just read about his accomplishments, we can safely say he was a heavyweight in the rock community. This was his line of work. What did he have to say? He wrote this in Scientific American. No terrestrial rocks, terrestrial, earth rocks, no terrestrial rocks closely approaching the age of 4.6 billion years have yet been discovered. If they had, they would have shown it to us by now. Now, we got all these other ancient dates, I know, but look at his admission. And then he makes the statement, the evidence for the age of the earth is what? Circumstantial. And yet you hear the shows and you go to the museums and you see the textbooks that your children may bring home from school, and there are these vast dates that are stated as if there's no doubt whatsoever that they are true. It must be based on some kind of hardcore facts. Well, he says the evidence for the age of the earth is circumstantial, being based upon indirect reasoning. Now, he believed in an ancient earth, but he is confessing that the evidence is indirect, it's circumstantial. Dr. John Eddy was an astrophysicist. He died a few years ago. He was associated with the High Altitude Observatory in Boulder, Colorado, and the university there. He likewise was highly recognized in his particular field. And he wrote in the prestigious Geo-Times a number of years ago this statement. So he was famous for studying the sun. and published and received awards for this kind of work. What did he say? There is no evidence based solely on solar observations that the sun is 4.5 to 5 billion years old. And we can multiply statements like this that are made in passing, incidentally, where they may be trying to argue in an indirect fashion or present some type of theories, but every once in a while you find them admitting, well, we come to these dates in a roundabout way. And he says, so far as observation goes, I thought that's what science is. It's observation, testing, verification. He says there's no observable evidence for that kind of ancient date for the sun. Now we go to the museums and we hear these shows and we see things, fossils, dinosaur bones, all kinds of rocks and artifacts. And they're assigned these ancient dates. And unless we are exposed to another viewpoint, a biblical viewpoint, that's all we would ever hear. You could imagine what people in general or children in general think, because all they're ever exposed to is the millions of years of this and that. Well, let's talk about how these dates, ancient dates, are arrived at, and identify the fact that there are problems admitted by the geologists who are themselves evolutionists. There are problems with these dating methods. And we're going to focus on two areas for a few minutes. And that is, first of all, assumptions. Remember that quote we had about assumptions in the model? And I'll put that up again in a minute. But what are the assumptions concretely in these dating methods of rocks? And what are the results of these dating methods? You know, Jeff mentioned a minute ago that my wife, Jill, and I have 3 daughters. And as they got a little bit older, our oldest is 24, and then the middle's 21, and now Allie is, she'll be 18 next week. I got a little bit more interested in recent years in terms of dating methods. And, I got things to say to fellas that come around about dating methods. It's important to think about how these scientists arrive at these ancient dates. What are their methods? Well, let's talk about assumptions for a minute. And I'll do so by making this illustration as we go into this particular part of our study. What if I were to say to you, it only takes me a minute to walk a mile? What? I can't run it either, I guarantee you. But we could do a test, right? We could do a test. We could say, okay, this is the distance of a mile. And then you might say, hey, I'll pull out my phone and I'll start the timer. And I say, wait a minute, I got a clock. We'll use my clock. In fact, I have this wonderful timepiece, this hourglass, and it takes a minute for all that sand to run through the hourglass. You might question that. I say, no, that's my clock. You see, if you let me have my own clock, and if I can just define what a minute is when it's really maybe 4 minutes, I can walk a mile in a minute using my clock. We have reason to believe about these dating methods that the clock is rigged to arrive at certain conclusions. We have good reason to believe that, and I'm going to introduce to you some quotations from evolutionists themselves who admit the assumptions and the problems associated with these clocks measuring time. Again, I'll be reading from some quotations, the documentation of which is found in this book on creation, evolution, and the age of the earth. And we'll think about these assumptions relative to the dating of rocks. First, the nature of formation, and then the lack of interference and the rate of decay. And I'll explain what I mean by these three assumptions. There are different kinds of dating methods that are very similar when it comes to this study of rocks. Let me give you one example. It's called the uranium lead method. So if you crack open a rock, you might find different kinds of material, right? In mining, they'll sink a shaft into the earth and bore through all of this rock and hope to find or mine precious metals, maybe gold or silver or some other thing. Well, within rocks there are these elements, and one element found and one element mined is uranium. Now, uranium degrades over time, and it decays into lead. And this is what geologists then tell us. And so they say you can tell how old a rock is if it contains uranium and lead by identifying how much uranium and how much lead is in that rock. Well, how do they do that? Well, they say this is how long it takes for uranium to degrade or decay. So if you know how long that takes and how much is there, you just start calculating its birthdays back to a point and say, well, given this much decay at this rate, here's how old this rock is. So there's all kinds of very similar dating methods based on the elements in the rock. Another one that operates the same way is called the potassium argon method. There's the parent element and the daughter element that is a matter of decay, a certain rate, and so a calculation is made. Well, what is the problem with this method? Very common method. Isotope dating methods for rocks. Think about these three assumptions. First of all, the assumption is being made that when this rock was formed, right, whether it was through some kind of catastrophe, a volcano, or whatever, when this rock was formed, it only had one element. Okay, nobody was there when the rock was formed, but they're making the assumption that there was only one element. Second, they make this assumption, that no other rocks bumped into it at the time. That it didn't receive any elements from some kind of process that was going on when all of this disturbance, whether it was water-laid rock or through some other kind of geological experience in the earth, there was this volcano erupted or whatever it might have been. Mudslide, and then the lithification of all of that sediment. Different ways these rocks can form. Well, they make the assumption there's no other outside source contributing to at the moment of formation, this rock. And then the rate of decay. They assume that it's just constant. Well, could something happen that make it go faster or slower or what? So if there's a problem with any of these assumptions, the clock's wrong. Well, what if there was a problem with all three of the assumptions? Well, it would be way off. Now, let me read to you from some of the scientific literature about these methods. Dr. David Seidman, writing in the Geological Society of America Bulletin, made this statement about the potassium-argon method, that is, potassium degrading into argon. He says, potassium-argon dates of these rocks may be subject to inaccuracies as the result of seawater alteration. Inaccuracies may also result from the presence of excess radiogenic argon-40 trapped in rapidly cooled rocks at the time of formation. That is, he is addressing assumption one. He says when this material hardened, when this thing became a rock, there may have been more than one element at the very beginning, and that throws the clock off. It's his admission that this is a problem, assuming there's only one element at the time of formation. Think about this. Writing in the Industrial Research and Development Journal, Dr. Frederick Juneman, a geologist, said the following. The age of our globe is thought to be some 4.5 billion years, based on radio decay rates of uranium and thorium. Such confirmation may be short-lived, as nature is not to be discovered quite so easily. There have been in recent years the horrible realization that radio decay rates are not constant. As previously thought, nor are they immune to environmental influences. Listen to this. He goes on to write, and this could mean that the atomic clocks are reset during some global disaster, and events which brought the Mesozoic age to a close may not be 65 million years ago, but rather within the age and memory of man. He says that because the rate is not constant, the clock might be off by 64 million years. I'd say it'd be hard to tell time with a clock like that, don't you? Again, this is an admission on their part that these so-called hardcore evidence dating methods maybe not are reliable as once thought. Dr. William Beck, again, an evolutionist, this is all documented here, said this: when all is said and done, there seems to be evidence that even the laws of nature are changing. Modern physics suggests the possibility that changes are taking place in the speed of light and the rates of chemical reactions. In other words, the universe is changing, and it becomes hazardous to attempt calculations concerning the very remote past. these are startling admissions. That this assumed, and everybody take it, this is how old things are, millions of years. Well, maybe we should pause and give it a second thought, because these methods are filled with assumptions that rig the clock. Remember this? We started with this. Calculating the age of the universe is accurate only if the assumptions built into the models being used to estimate it are also accurate. We have every reason to question these assumptions. If we didn't have reasons before, let's talk about some results of these methods. These are some of the skeletons in the closet that we're happy to bring out tonight when we think about these so-called scientific dating methods. The Cardenas lavas are a section of the Grand Canyon, right? The Grand Canyon is an amazing feature in our country, and you can visit it and see it. It's fantastic. And it's supposedly an observation right down all the way through that canyon of time, geologic time. Well, one of this areas is a strata of rock that resulted from volcanic lava. And it's named by an explorer who explored the Grand Canyon. Now, with that in mind, listen to this about these dating methods. Two scientists by the name of McKee and Noble used the potassium-argon method to study this lava. So they subjected it to this test, and they came up with the figure that this lava rock was 860 million years old. The same men used a different technique and found out with this technique that it was 300 million years older than the first test. Well, which test are you going to believe? The same rock yielding different results. Take, for example, this famous study of a volcanic rock in Nigeria. It was subjected to 4 different types of dating methods. You'll not be surprised to learn tonight that there were 4 different results. Anywhere from 2 million years old to 750 million years old. 4 methods, 4 results, separated by 748 million years. Well, how do they deal? How do evolutionary geologists deal with this kind of discrepancy in the dating methods? Here's what one geologist associated with Western Ontario University, writing in the Canadian Journal of Earth Sciences. Here's what Akio Hayatsu wrote. In conventional interpretation of potassium-argon age data, it is common to discard ages which are substantially too high or too low compared with the rest of the group or with the other available data such as the geologic time scale. The discrepancies between the rejected and the accepted are arbitrarily attributed to excess or loss of argon. So they date a rock, the result doesn't come back with what they expect, and they say, well, something must have happened. And so when they date a rock and it fits the preconceived geologic time frame, i.e. evolution, they say, oh, that test must be right. And the tests that are wrong, well, we'll just ignore them. So this is an interesting quotation because it is an admission that we get dates all over the map with these methods. Now, everyone's heard about the carbon-14 dating method. You hear about it all the time. It is a method applied to organic material and supposedly gives us the dates of all kinds of things. So, a geologist by the name of W.F. Libby of the Institute of Nuclear Studies in the University of Chicago developed this method. He won a Nobel Prize for his work in this area. Carbon-14, everybody's heard about that. He wrote the following in the American Scientist Journal. You read books and find statements that such and such a society or archaeological site is 20,000 years old. Who is this? This is the guy that developed carbon-14 dating. We learn rather abruptly that these numbers, these ancient ages, are not known. In fact, it is at about the time of the first dynasty in Egypt that the last historical date of any real certainty has been established. What does that say? When somebody tells you that, well, this rock or this tree or this fossil or whatever is so many million years old, it's been dated by scientists. We have every good reason to question that. And let me add to what we have said by noting the following results from carbon-14 dating. Listen to this. The shells of mollusks. What's a mollusk? It's a soft, right, slimy little thing with a shell on it, like a snail. A clam is another example, that kind of creature. The shells were subjected, of these little guys, to carbon-14 dating. And the shells of this little creature dated to be 2,300 years old. The funny thing about it, it was still alive. You wonder if it had a little name tag. Hi, my name is Methuselah, or something like that. Because that's one old snail. Freshly killed seals have been dated at 1,300 years old. The muscle tissue of a musk ox found near Fairbanks, Alaska. Muscle tissue from beneath the scalp of the musk ox was dated to be 24,000 years old. The funny thing about that was the same musk ox was subjected to the same dating method applied to the hair and found that the hair was only 7,200 years old, meaning he walked around bald for over 16,000 years. These are the kinds of absurdities that are arrived at with these methods. But they are shoved down our throats as if they're just gospel. And they are not. And we have substantiated from evolutionists themselves that we have every right to call into question both the assumptions and the results. We don't have time to get into this tonight, but there are other ways to think about features of the earth. That there may have been events in the past that were so catastrophic that with a lot of water and a little time, dramatic changes occurred. We'll talk about this more tomorrow evening. But that's something to bring into the equation that fits perfectly with the Bible's account of history. That is, the flood of Noah's day. Here's our basic argument. Unless the earth is billions of years old, there's not enough time for evolution. The earth is not billions of years old. There is no hardcore evidence that the earth is billions of years old. We are told by evolutionists that this is circumstantial, that this is inferential. And the methods that allegedly give us ancient dates ought to be called into question. If we can support this statement, the earth is not billions of years old, there is no time for evolution. Now, we could make a positive case for a young earth. We can't do that in the time we have tonight. But that must be added in, that catastrophism does explain the things that have been literally observed, like around Mount St. Helens, show what could happen in the earth very fast. And so we call into question this affirmation that the earth is billions of years old. But here's where we go for just a few minutes. Someone has said, well, I've heard all my life, and there are some scientists, there are always a few nuts in any field, and they're going off and saying things, but most scientists believe in the ancient earth, and maybe that's really what happened. Maybe God used the Big Bang. Maybe God used Darwinian evolution. Maybe we should believe in both. How are we going to evangelize and all of that? We're told. If we don't really accept science, quote unquote science. And so we need to at least take a moment to talk about the Bible and the age of the earth. And we're just going to survey very quickly in the time we have remaining that as a Christian who believes in the Bible, we should accept what the Bible has to say about the age of the earth. So we can talk about the dating methods. We can talk about a positive case to be made from geology for a young earth. But what about this infiltration of evolutionary chronology into the minds of Christians, this propaganda, this intimidation, and the fact that we even have preachers among us saying, well, this is what we need to do. We need to accept science, that is evolutionary chronology, and understand we need to really read Genesis more carefully. I read a blog not too long ago by a gospel preacher who said, here, it was very subtle. He was kind of not coming out of the closet, but I could hear him from behind the door saying, we need to learn to read Genesis. Like my grandmother didn't know how to read Genesis, but we need to be taught how to read Genesis. What does that even mean? Well, I know what it means. It means we should not take it so literally. And so there are all kinds of ways to cram in billions of years into the Bible. Is the Bible silent on this? Does the Bible have anything to say about the age of the earth? It does. Where are the billions? Well, some claim to find them here and there between Genesis 1:1, 1:2, or the days are actually millions of years, or whatever it might be. They try to find the billions, and we might say the unhidden agenda is what? We got to make the Bible fit what the atheists are telling us about the history of the earth. I think there's a problem there. And so there is an unhidden agenda, and that is reading the Bible as we're told to read it by the atheists. Why does it matter? It matters because whatever the Bible speaks to is true. If the Bible has spoken to this matter, it's true. And to then tell Christian people, well, you don't really know how to read the Bible, I find that to be very problematic. And there are other problems with that, but think about this analogy for just a second. If we thought about a scale, a picture of how long 4.5 billion years is, if we were to create a clock and we say this clock, 24 hours, the Earth starts at midnight, and 24 hours of this imaginary day is going to equal 4.5 billion years. At what time of this imaginary day does man come along, according to evolutionary chronology? If 4.5 billion years were to equal on this scale 24 hours, you know what time man shows up? 11:59 p.m. What if 4.5 billion years was represented by a line of 100 yards long? Where does man come up? The last inch from the goal line. Do you see what evolutionary chronology is like? What is the difference between the age of the earth and man? It's vastly different. But what does the Bible have to say? We'll think more about this tomorrow night, but I'm going to survey with you just quickly these verses. Aside from Genesis 1, that puts man 5 days younger than the earth, we're told, well, you don't know how to read that. It's figurative. There's a framework there. There's some beauty, some poetry, but don't take it seriously. Well, what about Exodus 20 and verse 11? For in 6 days, God created the heavens, the earth, and the sea, and all that in them is, and on the seventh day he rested. Where's that found? In the Ten Commandments relative to the Sabbath day given to the Jews, the Mosaic Law. So you work a week and you rest on the seventh. Why? Because that's what God did. It's outside of Genesis 1, outside of some kind of theory about figurative language. And you cannot take Exodus 20 and 11 seriously and separate the earth from man by billions of years. Isaiah 40 and verse 21 is very similar. So is Mark 10 and verse 6, when Jesus said that man and woman were created, male and female, from the beginning of the creation. Not at 11:59 p.m., which would hardly be the beginning of the creation, according to evolutionary chronology. Do you believe Jesus? What about Romans 1:20? For the invisible things of him, since the creation of the world, are clearly seen, being perceived through the things that are made. Who's perceiving the things that are made? Who's using their mind to know God exists? Human beings. And how long has this kind of thing been going on? From the beginning of the creation. And so we ought to appreciate many different passages that speak to this matter. The prophet's blood shed from the foundation of the world, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah. The blood of Abel, an illustration of innocent blood shed from what? The foundation of the world. You see this consistent picture through many different verses that put the earth and everything in it being created within the same time frame, not separated by billions of years. So we've talked about the admission of evolutionists regarding their methods. We've talked about the assumptions built into these dating methods and the results that are inconsistent with what we're often told. Catastrophism is another explanation that is positive proof for a young earth, and there is just no respectable way to cram billions of years into the Bible. Not if you believe Jesus, that man and woman were created from the beginning of the creation. So that's just a survey of some passages regarding the Bible and the age of the earth. How old is the earth? 5 days older than mankind. I think we're on good standing to believe Exodus 20 and verse 11. In 6 days, God created the heavens, the earth, the sea, and all that in them is. And I thank you so much tonight for your kind attention and encouragement.